Not everyone even believes in God. But even though surveys have shown that 85% of the people in all the countries of the world do believe in some sort of higher power, because surveys, sociologists in the past 10 years began traveling the world asking a single question, a one question survey. And the question was, do you believe in a higher power? And 8 out of 10 people said yes. They couldn't agree about what the higher power was or how it works or what it wants or what it does get if it doesn't get what it wants, all the rest. Lots of disagreement around that, which is why we have over 4,000 religions on the face of the earth.
And welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'm kind of lost for words. I'm just feeling very euphoric and happy. And I really believe this next guest that's on the podcast gives out and it transmits this very feeling and expression. And I'm very grateful to have him on the podcast. Neale Walsch, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking, and I hope that you are as well. How may I be of service to you?
Right now, your presence is just making me super smiley and happy. And right now, that's the first and foremost. And of course, I would just love for you to share with our audience your extensive experience and on the very topic of God in definition. I mean, and the conversations with God is funny because I've come across you many times with other people that have literally sworn by your books, and you've written, I think, 40. And so you have quite an extensive experience of this sort of like logging, a deeper notion and understanding of how you communicate with God and the conversations. And it always comes up by my friends. They're like, I read this book and this guy just changed my life. And I'm like, wow, well, I need to find out whatever he's having. I want some of it. So, so I'm very grateful to have you on the podcast today, my friend.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. And I'm only grateful, humbly, without any humor intended, really sincerely saying that I'm humbly grateful. If anything, some small thing I have done is benefiting other people. But I do want to make something clear at the outset of our exchange today, my friend, and that is that I'm understanding that all of us are having conversations with God all the time. It's not just Neale Donald Walsch who's having these conversations. In fact, I was told in my own particular exchange with the divine that all of us are having conversations with God all the time. We're simply calling him something else. Many people, in order to avoid being marginalized or to avoid being made fun of or ridiculed, people will call their conversations with God an epiphany or a sudden insight or a moment of expanded awareness or a psychic hit or even, women's intuition, whatever words we can get away with to describe the exact same experience that I'm having. The only difference is that I found it intriguing, never intended to write a book, never even thought that it would become a book. I was simply keeping a written record of what I was experiencing. But then I was told in the middle of the dialogue, you will make of this, Neale, one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And when I received that input, I thought, that's not going to happen. I mean, no legitimate publisher. I could self-publish, I wanted to, I guess, but no legitimate publishing company is going to put out a book by me simply because I've said that I'm talking to God. It's not going to happen. It's way off the map. So I really sent it to a publisher. I sent my handwritten notes, really. I Xeroxed my handwritten notes and sent them to a publisher on a dare. I was really daring God, show me. Because I completely understood that. Again, to repeat myself, no publisher is going to put this thing out because a man says, God's talking to me. But you know what? My phone rang about 2 weeks after I sent it. I sent it off to 4 or 5 publishers just to see what would happen. And my phone rang. And this gentleman says, I'm with Hampton Roads Publishing Company, and we'd love to put your book out. And I said, you're kidding. You're going to publish these notes that I sent you? I sent them to you on a dare. He said, well, we think it's a great work of fiction, and it's going to sell a lot of copies. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. This is not a work of fiction. You're not going to sell it as a work of fiction. If you're going to publish it, you need to publish it as it actually happened. And the guy said to me on the phone, are you telling me this actually happened to you? This wasn't, just a fictional story of a guy who goes off into the woods, and has an argument with God? I said, no, this is going on right now in my life. And he said, well, okay, as a work of nonfiction, it's going to be a tough sell. People are not going to be excited about reading a book by a guy who claims that God is talking directly to him. I mean, we're going to get a lot of ridicule. We're not going to sell. We'll be lucky if we sell 500 copies. And he was right. It turned out he was absolutely correct. It did not sell 500 copies. It sold 5 million. Not bragging, just saying, when God says something, you probably should listen. Wound up being translated into 37 languages and sold in every country of the world. Mm-hmm. And I mean, again, I don't want people to think I'm boasting about it, but I'm stood back in amazement. Are you kidding me? In the meantime, I was continuing to have the experience, and I got called by a major publisher in New York. The first publisher was a relatively small independent publishing house, Hampton Roads. But then the people at Penguin Putnam, one of the largest publishing companies in the world, called me. And they said, essentially, do you have any sisters like that at home? And I said, well, I'm still having the experience, if that's what you're asking. They said, can you send us anything you've got, anything more? Send us whatever you've got. We'd like to put out, book 2, another book of this if you have enough to fill a book. I said, well, gosh, I'm not thinking that I want to write a series of books. But they said, well, we're getting a lot of response because they had been tracking what was going on with what became book 1 in the series. And so, I did send them some notes about my continuing conversation, which became book 2. And on it went for a series of books. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Now, with this incredible journey and realization that you submitted this stuff pretty much technically having a joke with yourself, not expecting anything to happen, but I'm assuming conversations with God was giving you the insight that if you publish this stuff, this is going to help people understand their own relationship with me and what they're doing in their lives. Did you get that message? Did he give you that message, or it was still sort of like you weren't sure what the outcome was going to be?
She never said that in specific terms. I never got the message, this is going to help other people, at least not in what became the first book. I was told something like that later in my dialogue. But the first dialogue, again, you have to understand, was never intended to be written. It was never written as a book. It was a very personal experience between me and the God of my understanding. And so I never even thought of it in terms of what kind of help it could give anybody else. I was simply asking my own personal questions about really everything in life. Right livelihood, career, health, sexuality, relationships, parenting, diet. I mean, really all the kinds of questions that a person might have in life. And I was asking all those questions for my own edification. It never occurred to me, even after I was told in the dialogue, you will make of this a book, I thought, well, we'll see about that. But even then, I simply maintained it as an ongoing interaction in a very private way. So I was kind of shocked when I started getting emails from people from Singapore to South America to, England and France and Germany and Russia. I was getting emails from Moscow, and I thought, oh my gosh, this book is suddenly everywhere. And I realized it had turned into, I don't know how to put this modestly, but a global phenomenon, global publishing phenomenon.
Yeah.
So, that's
I was just going to say, I have so many people that I know that have been so touched by your sharing, and it's
yes.
changed their life. They're like, this is like fundamentally restructured my whole view of reality by being able to share in all the information, all the interactions that you've had with God has resonated with. I'm just going to be very modest and say millions of people.
Yeah, I don't know whether you're familiar with James Thurber, but James Thurber is an American um, playwright from years ago who created a character called Everyman, capital E, Verma, Everyman. The reason I realize now, in retrospectively, I realize that the reason the book became so massively popular is because I asked the questions of every man. The average person would read the book and see themselves there. People saw themselves in the book. And I think that's why it resonated so much with people. And also, when they read the answers that I received in my dialogue with the God of my understanding, I think they also resonated with the answers. That is, they said to themselves, of course, of course. This surely must be the way it is. And to many people, they felt reaffirmed in what they have always believed. And here was a person outside of their own mind saying exactly the same thing. So I began receiving, many, many, many emails from people saying essentially that, you wrote my book. You wrote my book. I could have given, those same answers if I had found the process by which you receive those answers yourself. One lady wrote me an email. She said, "Dear Mr. Walsch, there is a bold-faced lie on the cover of your book." I said, "Really? What do you mean?" She said, "Well, your book says Conversations with God, and the subtitle says An Uncommon Dialogue." She said, "There's nothing uncommon about it. All of us are having conversations with God. I have them all the time. So you lied on the cover of your book." And I had to kind of squiggle out of it because I didn't even give it the subtitle. I said, well, the truth is the subtitle was placed there by the publisher. I didn't call it an uncommon dialogue, but the publisher did, and because I guess he thought that it was uncommon. But you're perfectly right. The whole point of the dialogue is that all of us, as I said a minute ago, are having conversations with God all the time. But it never occurred to me that anyone else would ever read this material. So it wasn't written in the form of a book that I thought would answer everyone's questions or help a great many people. It was helping me. That's all I can say. It was helping me. It really did move me through my midlife crisis in my 50s and my middle 50s. I got to the age of 53, 54, 55 and began wondering, really? Is this all there is? Is there no more than just this? Get the guy, get the girl, get the car, get the job, get the house, get the better car, get the better job, get the better house, get the better spouse, get the kids, get the grandkids, get the gray hair, get the cruise tickets, get the illness, and get the hell out. That's the process. That's all that's going on. is there really nothing more than this? And that's where I was coming from when I was asking God, okay, what's up here? What's going on? Tell me there's something more going on, something more than meets the eye. It turns out that Shakespeare was correct. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
He had some incredible insight, actually, Shakespeare.
Oh, he was a wonderful metaphysician. Who comes up with a statement like, to be or not to be?
I was just about to say that because
That
it's
is the question.
this.
Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to rise up against a sea of troubles, and by opposing to end them, to die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there is the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil. Master metaphysician Bill was.
You had me at hello. There you go. Look at that. Have you ever seen that movie, Jerry Maguire?
Yeah.
And they're like, you had me at hello. You that was really, really beautiful. Um, 40 books later, are you lost with conversations with God? Like, you know, is there ever a moment where he's like, I'm sorry, I'm having a cigarette break, I'm out to lunch, I'm going on vacation for a couple of weeks, I'll talk to you later. Has that ever happened?
Not because God has deserted me or found something more important to do, but it did happen to me once because I had deserted her and found something more important to do. So I kind of stepped away from, um, or gave myself permission to just fall back from the experience in the middle of the process of what became, although I didn't know it at the time, what ultimately became book three. And the material in book three took almost 2 years, better part, more than a year and a half to come through me because I was not paying attention. I was not focusing on the experience. I was living my life, I was getting on with things. And many, many weeks would go by even between questions. I'd ask a question, get an answer, and then I was kind of in ho-humsville about it. Oh, I had, other stuff going on in my life. And so I wasn't really, again, trying to write a series of books. I was simply having a personal experience. So I did have a period of time there in between book two and three, in between what became book two and three. I had a period of time when what you described happened, but not because God deserted me. And she even said to me in book three, where have you been? It you know, it's taken a long time here to get back together. So I I did find my way back to him, and I'm sure he was very happy to see me in that kind of a communication process. Once again, because I think that he knew, all along, as we said a minute ago, there's more going on here than meets the eye. And she actually said right to me, Neale, don't imagine this is just for you. This is going to touch many people. So ultimately, I was told that, but not until many, many, many hundreds of pages into what became the ongoing dialogue, which ultimately covered more than 3,000 pages.
So how does that make you feel when you realize that you're literally a catalyst, a conduit to
Humbled,
God's message?
humbled, and a little bit, dare I use the word frightened, or at least perhaps a gentler word, apprehensive, because, I don't want to lead anyone astray. I don't want, be leading like lemmings to the sea. I don't want to be the cause of someone disengaging from their own internal experience of the divine. And I've had far too many people, to be honest with you, tell me that they've actually left their religion. They abandoned their organized religion because so much of what's in conversations with God turned out to be directly contradictory to what many of the world's major religions teach us, namely that God is judgmental, condemning, and punishing. So I was told that God is not judgmental, condemning, and punishing, and I sure hope I'm right, because if I'm wrong, I'm in big trouble. Because not only have I rejected the notion that God is judgmental, condemning, and punishing, but I've caused millions of people to do so. Not one or two people, not 5 or 6 people, not a small congregation, but millions of people have said to me, "You've changed my whole experience." So now I'm in very big trouble if God is in fact judgmental, condemning, and punishing.
Now, have you ever been given sort of any sort of idea or messaging of perhaps maybe teaching someone this dialogue, even though it seems very simplistic, but most people are lost to find their own dialogue?
Well, I had a
You have
publisher.
Go
I had
ahead.
a publisher call me. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was thinking of my answer to your question.
Yeah.
Most writers, and myself included, by the way, in my first 39 books, will write a book and then try to find a publisher. And would anybody like to publish this? It's very, very, very rare that a publisher will actually call an author. But my phone rang a 2 or 3 years ago. My phone rang, and a lady said, would you be willing? I'm the president of a publishing company. Would you be willing to write a book for us? I said, oh, well, what did you have in mind? And she said, we would love you to write a book explaining to people how the average person might have their own conversation with God, or at least could, get closer to it. Because I said, I can't guarantee that will happen. I can't make a guarantee. She said, but you could at least share your process, and people could be on their own, see what happened. I said, yeah, I'd be very happy to do that. So I did. I sat down and I thought about it, and I wrote a book which they titled God Talk, which described the process by which I had my own CWG, that is my own conversation with God, and how the average person might approach that experience as well. It came out to be, I didn't really design it this way, kind of like a step-by-step process. But when I finished describing what I went through, I realized that it was, in fact, a 6-step process by which people might have their own experience of the divine.
And so would you mind sharing with the audience what that would be?
I'd be happy to. The first step of the 6-step process is what I call possibility. That is, the person have to acknowledge that it is even possible that a God exists. Not everyone even believes in God. But even though surveys have shown that 85% of the people in all the countries of the world do believe in some sort of higher power, because surveys, sociologists in the past 10 years began traveling the world asking a single question, a one question survey. And the question was, do you believe in a higher power? And 8 out of 10 people said yes. They couldn't agree about what the higher power was or how it works or what it wants or what it does get if it doesn't get what it wants, all the rest. Lots of disagreement around that, which is why we have over 4,000 religions on the face of the earth. And I'm not making that number up, by the way. It's an actual number.
Wow.
You type in Google, how many religions are there? How many faith traditions being practiced today on the earth? And they'll tell you 4,223. So, but most of those religions believe that God does, or at least at one point did, talk directly to humans.
Mhm.
So I began to accept as possible, one, that God exists, and two, that God actually talks to human beings. Because, our traditions, our cultures have told us that God, presumably talked to Moses, and he brought down the Ten Commandments. And so many, many people, not a few, but billions of people believe that. And then many billions more believe that God talked directly to the man named Jesus, and that God was embodied in that personhood. And many billions of people believe that God spoke directly to Muhammad, bless his holy name, and Buddha, and the list goes on, male and female through the years, Julian of Norwich, Catherine of Genoa, Teresa of Avila, Hildegard of Bingen, and Mother Mary, of course. So we've had a whole long list of people to whom God is reputed to have spoken. And most people, if they believe in God at all, believe that God spoke to those people, which brought me to step number 2 in my process, which is worthiness. It's not a question, if you believe in God at all, of whether God speaks to human beings, but maybe it would only be like the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the head ulama or the chief rabbi or somebody with some credential, but not the first baseman for the New York Yankees. I mean, come on. So, God doesn't speak to the average person, and certainly not to the likes of me. So the second step was to be willing to judge myself as worthy with all the sins on my soul that I've committed. And that's not a point of humor, I might add. I've done some things in my life that I'm not really happy about. I've never stolen anyone's life savings or, hurt anyone, killed anyone, or did anything like that. But I've done some things that I'm not very proud of, that I'm ashamed of. I had an affair on my first wife, as an example. I'm not proud of that, and I feel bad about it to this day. And we're talking about 60 years ago. But so I've done some things like, what in the hell was I thinking? So given the mistakes I've made in my life, could I embrace my worthiness to be spoken to by God, if I believe there is a God at all? So I had to make a big leap and step into that, say, you know what? I may not be worthy in my eyes, but all of us are worthy in God's eyes. Which took me to step 3. Could I embrace with willingness the experience of having conversations with God? And I say that because it's not a small step, by the way. I had to be willing to overcome the global and historical cultural bias against such an experience. People call other people who claim that God's talking directly to them, they call us crazy. They put us on the 6th floor in the psychiatric ward of the local hospital. And so, or worse yet, religions actually, if you claim in some religions that God is talking directly to and through you, religions will tell you that you're a blasphemer. You're an apostate. You're a heretic. And my friend, all joking aside, in some religions, in some countries of the world, those are grounds for the death sentence.
Wow.
That is, some religions will put you to death for claiming that God is speaking directly to and through you. Who do you think you are? Who the hell do you think you are? So step number 3 after worthiness is willingness. To be willing to overcome the massive human bias against the idea that God is, if God exists at all, that he's talking directly to you. Step number 4, wakefulness. Once we decide that we are worthy and that we are willing, we have to be wakeful. That is, we have to not miss. I mean, don't fall asleep at the wheel. Be aware of what's going on around you and notice that God is talking to you in 100 different ways across 1,000,000 moments in 1,000 lifetimes. And if you're not wakeful, you will miss those communications. So stay awake. Don't fall asleep. Don't sleepwalk. Step number 5 is acceptance. Once you are wakeful enough to pick up on some of the incoming messages that we are receiving all our lives, don't write them off. Accept them as for what they are. Don't, that's just a coincidence, just a coincidence. Or, it's serendipity. It was just a moment of serendipity. It's not really significant. Don't dismiss the messages that you're receiving. But in fact, give them the importance that they deserve. Which brings me to the 6th and final step in my life, which was discernment. To be able to discern the difference between genuine communications from the divine and given to us through the soul of each of us, or communications that are coming to us from 1,000 different sources every single day of our life, especially these days. Years ago, it wasn't quite the way but these days we're inundated with incoming messages from social media, from cell phones, from television, from 100 different sources. We're being bombarded on a daily basis with incoming messages. It's pretty hard to avoid. So to be able to tell the difference, not everything is, what's popularly called a sign. It's a sign. The other day I reached into my pocket to get my car keys out. And as I pulled out the car keys from my pocket, a couple of pieces of folding money, fell out of my pocket and fell on the ground. It's a sign. I'm supposed to take all my folding money out of all my pockets and throw it on the ground. It's a sign from God. It was an accident. So discernment, to be able to tell the difference between things that are occurring and things that are really messages from your soul, which is an individuation of the divine. Thank you very much. To be able to discern the difference. So those are the 6 steps: possibility, worthiness, wakefulness, willingness, wakefulness, acceptance, and discernment. I explain them in greater detail than I could possibly go into here in the book called God Talk. Now, the publishers of that book did something really interesting. They put a call out on the internet to the general public. They said, if you feel that you've ever had an experience of divine intervention in your life, send us your story. And they received hundreds of emails from people all over the world who felt that they had intervention from the divine in their life. And so they put 7 or 8 of the best stories in the book itself to prove a point. They wanted to make it very clear. This is not just about one guy in Oregon, Neale Donald Walsch, who claims to be having divine intervention in his life. People all over the world are having these experiences all the time. And here are the stories of 8 or 9 of them telling you all about their particular experience, because they wanted people who read the book to see that it's about all of us, not just one of us. So that's the sum and substance of what's in the book called God Talk. Fascinating stories from other people. A single mom whose message that she received reaffirmed her belief in that God heard her prayers. A scientist whose conversations with the presence of God dramatically changed his life. A teacher who has brought information on how she could be more effective in the classroom. Many, many fascinating stories of people who received what they felt were instances of divine intervention. So I'm glad they put those in the book, because it made me feel, thank goodness, less of an anomaly.
Well, So that leads me to the discernment part, because normally within practices I teach people there's a fundamental cultivational energetic validator for the stuff that I teach within Taoism. So it's like you can really feel what state you're in when you're receiving specific transmissions. Now, for yourself, do you have any sort of like registered sort of like physical, you know, validation that makes it true that it's like God directly with the dialogue, or, you know, not the God of McDonald's, but the true God that's
My
like
answer,
telling
my
you
well, my answer is yes and no.
that.
How I want to answer that question is by saying sometimes yes, and but it's not required. It's not all the time. Often they'll just be out of the blue. I'm not in any particular frame of mind. I'm not, being quiet with myself. I'm not in a moment of meditation. I'm just walking down the street out of the blue. Boom. I will be aware of something that I was not aware of before, uh, or be given some guidance or some insight or whatever it might be. So the answer to your question from me, my answer is yes and no. Yes, I sometimes can be deliberately intending or choosing to be in a space where I could receive such information, such messages. And sometimes I'm just, living my life. And it'll just dawn on me. And I'm not the only person who's had that experience. Again, people call it a psychic hit or an epiphany or a sudden insight in the shower stall. I remember actually having that experience actually in the shower stall. I'm taking a shower, I'm shampooing my hair, I'm taking a shower, and at some point, for some reason, I just felt the presence of something more than just me in the shower stall. And I thought I was going to fall. I thought I was going to lose my balance. So I put my hand against the side of the shower stall to try to hold myself up. And my hand went right into the wall. I mean, this was the experience I had. Obviously, it didn't physically, but I watched the submolecular particles of my hand pass by the submolecular particles of the wall. So it was like this. My hand went where the wall was not.
So, but you said it didn't happen, but it did happen. So
Yes, it did. And I pulled my hand out of the wall and I went, oh my God. And I scared the hell out of myself. I mean, I scared the hell right out of myself. And I stepped out of the shower and I was still in that altered state of mind. I'm drying myself off and I swear I could tell you the thread count of that towel. I mean, I was so present, so completely present with my physicality. And that put me in the state of mind close to what you're describing when people have had those particular experiences.
now, did that ever inspire you to want to potentially follow that way of experience, or that was a little too freaky, or the
Well, it
idea?
wasn't too freaky, but it was too un, unpredictable. That is, I didn't think it was freaky so much as I thought it was not something that I could spontaneously, arbitrarily recreate. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll simply put my hand through the wall, or oh, I know what I'll do. I can just feel the thread count of this towel. So unless I'm in an altered state of consciousness, I have to say I have experienced that. I haven't taken hallucinogenic drugs, but I did once in my life, only once. Interesting, when I was a younger person, but I did have some marijuana once. I never did it again for a very important reason. I didn't like the feeling of being totally out of control. I can recall walking up the steps to my apartment when I was on a marijuana high And those steps might as well have been 150 steps high, because I was like moving in slow motion. And when I finally got to the top of the steps and got into my apartment, I just sat in a chair and I was, what's the phrase? Spaced out, just spaced out. It was a moment of bliss in a certain sense, but it was also something that I didn't really like. I thought, you know what? I'm not going to take marijuana ever again, because I don't want to be so out of control that I don't even know what's going on. So I decided not to do that ever again, and I never did it again.
Well, I mean, when you put your hand, like when you put your hand in the wall, when I see things transmute in this 3D reality, because I want the audience to know you weren't sleeping, you're actually having a shower in a shower store, eyes open, and your hand went through the wall.
Yes,
It
sir.
wasn't a figment of your imagination.
No, it certainly was not. It
No,
absolutely
not.
happened.
And so when I see things transmute in this 3D reality with my eyes open, they kind of wiggle and shape and wiggle and move and then change. What was it like for you? Did it seem like something similar to that, or was it you kind of just moved into this sort of, hang on, I can move all the way through this, what seemingly would.
I was so much in shock that I couldn't believe what was happening. So, excuse me, so I wasn't paying attention to any of the secondary or tertiary sensations around it. I was just looking at my hand going into the wall, going, literally saying, my God, my hands going into the wall. And I began to question it. How is that possible? I don't understand. And of course, I pulled my hand out of there because it was so unusual and so abnormal. And then when I put it back in, it wouldn't go back in, because I had somehow separated myself from the state of mind that allowed that to happen to begin with. But it was very, 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 very real. And people have had experiences. Many people have had experiences that are very real of those kinds of encounters with our reality. And that's when we discover our reality is not what we think it is. Or as I said a minute ago, there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Now, you're a veteran, 40 logged incredible experiences, best-selling author. What would you sum up your whole journey to this point right now? And you're never lost for your dialogue with God, and it's quite evident now, having created so many of these documented experiences and millions of people around the world, you've changed their life. Where does that take you? Have you felt satisfied with God's answers to this point as to what is the purpose of this whole experience?
Yes, I'm profoundly satisfied with God's answers. It's been made very clear to me. Neale, number one, the first thing you must understand is that you're not this. You're not your body. And you're not this. You're not even your mind. Your body and your mind, Neale, are simply tools, pieces of equipment used by who you really are. And who you really are is a spiritual being. You're a soul, what some religious traditions call a soul. And so you are a spiritual entity having a physical experience. So, and then of course I said, okay, if that's true, why? Why, if I'm already a spirit and having this wonderful life in the realm of the spirit, why would I come to a place like this and physicalize, if you please? Why would I incarnate in a physical body? For what purpose? And God said, because you wish to experience, not just to know, but to experience who you really are. That the soul yearns to experience itself in its true identity. I said, well, why can't I just do that in the realm of the spiritual? When I'm in heaven, if you please, wouldn't that be heaven? God said, well, not not completely, but heaven is three realms: the realm of the spiritual, the realm of the physical, which is also part of God's kingdom, and the realm of pure being. And you come to the realm of the physical because in the realm of the physical, there is a contextual field that allows you to experience who you are, because the contextual field contains who you are not. And in the absence of who you are not, who you are cannot be experienced. I said, oh, come on, help me understand. This is getting a little complicated. What are you trying to say? God said, let me simplify it for you, Neale. Let's just say, as a metaphor, that you are the light. Say, Neale, I am the light. I said, okay, I am the light. Now, supposing you can know yourself as the light, but if you want to experience yourself, which is an entirely different thing, if you want to experience yourself as the light, and there's nothing else around you but the light, you can't experience yourself as the light. Only if you create the darkness, then you could experience yourself as being the light. But in the absence of the darkness, the light is not discernible as a discrete experience. And I said, wow, I think I understand. And I remembered a time, and I said to God, I remember when I was a young boy, I was about 12 or 13, and my older brother came home on furlough. He was in the Air Force, and he came home on furlough. He looked like Clark Gable, the movie star. He was 6 feet tall, and he was so handsome. And I said to my mom, I want to be 6 feet tall when I grow up. Of course, she couldn't miss the chance. She said, you got to eat your spinach. But she, nevertheless, God said to me, but what if I had put you in 6 foot tall world, where every human being was precisely 6 feet tall, where every tree was 6 feet tall, where every blade of grass was 6 feet tall, where every flower was 6 feet tall? What if everything in the universe was precisely 6 feet tall? How could you then experience what it's like to be 6 feet tall? Oh, I see. You would need to create something that was not 6 feet tall. I get it. That's what's called the contextual field, Neale. And that's why you came to the realm of the physical, because the field has already been created, and everything that you are not exists in the contextual field. Then you can decide who you are in relationship to that which you are not.
Wow.
And so the purpose of my life is for me to express and to experience that I am, dare I say it, as are we all, an individuation of divinity. And I allow myself to use the moments, the experiences, the events, the circumstances of my everyday life as opportunities for me to demonstrate who I really am. Do I do it every single time? Regretfully not. Do I do it more these days than before? I'll give myself that. Yes, I do. So that's what I'm doing here, and that's the purpose of my life. I could have put this into 2 words, really. Self-realization. To realize, that is to make real the expression and to experience who I really am. I'm an ocean on the wave of divinity. I'm a wave. I'm not the ocean itself, but I'm a wave on the ocean. The wave is an individual expression of the ocean. It's an arising of the ocean in beautiful, powerful, individual form. But when that expression is complete, the wave recedes back into the ocean whence it came. That is precisely, God said to me, your relationship to me, Neale. Therefore, simply step into the living experience of who you are. And I said, give me some examples on how I could do that. She said, oh, you've been given 1,000 examples by 100 wonderful teachers. But I'll put it to you in a simple paragraph. Love, love, love everyone. including, yes, including your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you. And do good to those who would do you evil. And when a man slaps you on the right cheek, turn and offer him your left. And when a man sues you at court and demands your coat, give him your shirt as well. And when a man forces you to walk 1 mile with him, go with him twice. And raise not your fist to heaven, and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well. Now you tell me how anyone who has received those messages cannot have their life changed.
I'm lost for words, because I actually know people that have literally read your books and have had fundamental healings on all levels, like healings. Like I'm sure you probably have stories, but I mean, I'm talking about people that are literally have been lost and feeling helpless and hopeless and just sick on every degree, like physically, mentally, emotionally. And through this expression, through your sharing of your dialogue, have healed themselves.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to have heard that. I'm very grateful and very humbled by that. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, it's and meeting you today is like, I don't know, it just puts me in a state. And I mean, we mentioned this just briefly before we got on, but I mean, you are literally this conduit that's transmitting this state. And you, through your own admission, you're like, hey, look, I'm just human having this experience, sharing my ups and downs, my attunement to God. It's and all the glory that comes with the dialogue. But you are really resonating there, my friend. Like I measure everything in energy, frequency, vibration, and I'll just say it, I'm spiritually high as a kite. And I'm super happy. You make me feel warm and joyful and open and whole. And my own admission is I experience that when I'm in the presence of God. And I come across God quite often, and his frequency, or as you've referred to him, her, is that a little slip, or is that how is that you go back? I know within the Chinese culture, when we talk about someone within Mandarin, it's him, she, or he is the same thing. But what does that mean to you?
It means that God has no particular gender, of course, and nor does God even have a particular form. That it would be immensely egotistical of us to assume that God even looks like us, could look like a Martian, or like someone from the planet Xeon. So if we imagine that God has a particular form, then we have no understanding of who and what God is at all. So I've come to an awareness that, oh, I see.
Mm.
God is the essential essence that is life itself, filled with consciousness, and of course can take the ability to form itself in any way that it wishes, in the way that it knows we will most readily and quickly receive and understand that which we call the divine. So did God appear to Our Lady of Guadalupe and actually make it? Yeah. Did God appear to Moses on the mountaintop? Of course. Did God appear to, Muhammad, bless his holy name? Certainly. Did God appear to Julian of Norwich? Yeah. Did God talk directly to me? You're darn right she did. And he talks to everybody else. as well, every hour of every day. And when we understand that, we start seeing life in a whole different way. We even see each other in a whole different way. Oh, there I go again. You know, I was walking down the street a few years ago with a wonderful spiritual teacher, and we came across a homeless man who was sitting on the sidewalk, leaning up against a building with a bottle of Four Roses in his hand, just having some sip of whiskey, just, you know. And I said, well, poor guy. And my teacher said, does that person feel different from you? That's just another version of you. There you go again, being a street person. There you go again, being this. There you go again, being a saint. There you go again, being a scoundrel. There you go again, being loving. There you go again, being cruel. Neale, you have been and you are all of it. Therefore, condemn none of it. Or as someone else put more succinctly, judge not and neither condemn. It's really quite simple.
I mean, profound revelations in so many different ways, what you're sharing with the audience, because the simplicity is in the eyes of the beholder, and you are the very magnet that brings that awareness to millions and millions of people to reunite their relationship of their direct dialogue with God that has never left them. And it's sort of like this beautiful, friendly reminder that comes with these incredible offerings that you put out into the universe.
You know, my friend, I've put a lot of this in a narrative book. It's not a dialogue book, but it's a book called The God Solution, which I suggest could be the solution to humanity's ongoing problem of how to create the kind of world we wish we lived in. And I tell people, you know, if you want to read a copy of the author's manuscript of The God Solution, I'll email it to you. I'll upload it to your computer, no cost. All you have to do is send me an email saying you'd like to get a copy, and I'll send it to you. So I want to share with your audience that if anyone wants a copy of that, absolutely free, just drop me a note, Neale@NealeDonaldWalsch.com, and say, Neale, send me the God Solution, which is a summary of all that you and I have talked about here for the past hour.
This has been a real pleasure that you've taken time out to share with the audience. And, you know, there's just like that God Solution is one little slither of the incredible contribution that Neale has made by sharing all this with the world. And we're now officially 40 books deep, correct?
Yes, sir.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible, because that means that someone always has an opportunity to find whatever they need through your expression.
That's my hope, that they will avail themselves of some of that material. And of course, I'm only one of many, many sources. There are wonderful authors all over the world and in every culture and every age group. And I am one of them, fair enough. And there are other messengers of insight and wisdom and clarity. You're one of them, obviously. You're touching the lives of people all the time, every day. So you know what? All of us are messengers. The only question is how many of us actually know it and how many of us are actually activating our true identity. Thank you for being one of those who's chosen to do so.
Thank you, my dear friend. I will ask you in closing, what is your definition of consciousness?
Pure love allowed to flow to its highest idea. the highest idea we ever had about ourselves, about God, about life, about all of it. It's what I call consciousness. Consciousness is another word for awareness. And the highest level of consciousness is that which is aware that pure love is all there really is. Everything else is an illusion.
Absolutely beautiful. I'm very grateful to have had you on the podcast today and share your insight. And quite frankly, I mean, just for the audience, that was a direct message from God right there. I watched it. I watched the energy move through you, my friend. That was really on tap. So you might have got rusty by book 3, but I think you've got it down now by book 40. It's at on tap. I would confess to say that I'm pretty sure most of the things that come out of your mouth, probably 99% of them, are just directly a translation or communication with God, is from what I could see, which is really profound.
Those are gentle and kind things to say to me, and I receive that energy with humility and gratitude. Thank you, my friend.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us. I'm going to have all your social media where they can find you and come and explore your incredible library of insight and connection that's been life changing for millions of people around the world. And please go and check out Neale and reach out to him for a copy of his latest book and get into a deeper nature, because I personally have at least a dozen people I know that have been absolutely transformed by your messaging and what you're sharing with the world. So I'm very grateful that you're here. I'm grateful to be in the presence of someone that's contributing to what I consider the conscious collective and awareness of all things, and never losing sight of that
It
is.
was lovely to be here with you as well, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. I want to thank Neale. I want to thank the universe. I want to thank God. I want to thank the audience. And I'm your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you on the next one, guys.